Hello, my quilting friends. I'm Leah Day, a professional quilter, author, and online teacher. And this podcast is all about quilting, running a creative business, and balancing our busy hands with our busy lives. You can find the episode show notes and links to everything mentioned in this podcast at leahday.com. Enjoy the show. Hello, my quilting friends. Leah Day here with episode 17 of the podcast. And today I'm interviewing Leah Kabaker. She is a hobby quilter, but has a lot of experience in the fabric industry. She designed textiles mostly for wholesale for many years and really has a fascinating perspective on design and fabrics and art. I just really enjoyed talking with her about a wide range of topics today. So as far as a few updates about what's going on around the house, we have a big renovation going. It is massively huge and massively messy, and so I have not been quilting this week. I basically took a week off of the machine, and I have put on my painting clothes and put my hair in pigtails. That's the way I like to wear my hair when I'm renovating, because I can cover it with a handkerchief, and then I don't get paint in my hair. So I've been kind of in renovation mode all week and just really, as my friend Meg says, picking them up and putting them down. Just really working hard on this renovation. And it was one of those funny things where I thought this was going to be kind of a quick and simple renovation, and then it ended up not being that at all. The whole point of it was to take the deck off the house. Now, that has not happened yet. We're 5 days into this renovation. That hasn't happened yet. We had to take the deck off the house because it's rotting. It's literally rotting off the back of the house. To replace the deck would cost around $20,000 because it was never built properly. It was never built to code. And there's not enough space between the door downstairs and the door upstairs. So I made the, I think, wise decision to not replace the deck, to just simply tear it off the back of the house. And one day I can go back in and add an addition to my house if I want to back there, or it can be just a window from now on. The back door, the door that was leading out to the back deck, is just going to become a big picture window. And so what I didn't anticipate is just how much work that would be to finish the inside. Mostly because I think I bit off a little bit more than I could chew. So the window came in and we installed that 2 days ago. And then we had to put paneling all around it in order to, obviously finish off the walls. And then, to really make everything look consistent, it had to be painted. And then because the walls in the hall were also looking terrible, I was like, okay, well, let's also paint the hall. And then the ceilings, I don't think the ceilings have been painted since the house was built in 1973. So the ceilings all needed a coat of paint. And then because the ceilings it's a kind of an open floor plan, the ceilings connect seamlessly from the living room to the kitchen and the hall. So all of the ceiling needed to be painted through all of 3 rooms. And that meant the kitchen was out of commission too. So small job, kind of snowballed. I wrote a post on this if you want to read more about it. It's called Renovation Snowball. You can find it on the Free Motion Quilting Project, freemotionproject.com. And it's been an adventure. We had kind of a contractor issue where we hired a guy to do this job. I really wanted someone else to do it. I can do this stuff, but with the window, I was a little concerned because it's so big and so heavy that I didn't think that we could physically do it. It's just too big of a job, basically. So I wanted to hire someone to do this. Unfortunately, this guy came in and talked a big game, like he could do all of it and he was going to do such a great job, and all that kind of stuff. And, I don't think that this is indicative of all contractors by any means. But I just found that he was very overconfident and very egotistical as far as his skill level. And then whenever he actually got in here on Monday and started working, it became very clear within a very short space of time that he could not do this job. And I'm glad that we started with painting as the first step. Like we started out just like say, hey, prime the walls, paint the ceilings, just get started with that. Because it became very evident that he couldn't even paint a ceiling, it's tough. And if you miss spots, it's very obvious. So I came in and there were these huge spots left open, it was streaky. It was really, really bad. And then on the walls, he had just kind of slapped the primer up once, we told him like he was getting ready to actually paint the walls. And didn't realize that I wanted them primed, even though I felt like I had made that very, very clear. I mean, why else would I have bought 2 gallons of primer? Anyway, so he was getting ready to paint, stopped him, said, no, prime first. And then when I came up and looked at the primer job, he had just let the paint run. He just kind of slapped it on the wall and then not cared to go back and double check that it was rolled properly and it was rolled evenly and didn't even use it to cover up a lot of the, bad stains and bad marks on the wall and stuff. So it was really frustrating, when confronted with, that he had done a bad job. He got a really bad attitude. I mean, just really aggressive and egotistical and could not take direction. And this was not coming from me. This was coming from my dad. And, and I don't know what was into that. I think that there are a lot of guys that get into this stuff and they, over promise and then they under deliver. And it's really unfortunate. This is not the first time that I've had issues with a contractor. So Tuesday, when he showed up, we'd already pretty much decided, not happy with this work, but we could use the extra set of hands if he is willing to work by our direction, meaning I completely stop working on quilting and come upstairs and kind of boss this guy around, not boss him around, but just, I'm like, hey, now it's time to paint this wall. Please double check your paint drips, like guiding him through it. And he couldn't handle that. He quit. He just quit without being paid. He didn't want to be paid. So in one way I'm like, well, yay, I saved some money. But on the other side, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm really frustrated that this guy wasn't even willing to try harder, and put forth the effort. So disappointed on that. And I was really worried that we weren't going to be able to get the window in. And thank goodness for family. That's all I got to say. Really, thank goodness for family. Dad and I were able to fix the wall, tear out the door and the window that was next to it and tear all of that out. And we were able to frame it back in and frame in the window. And then we called my father-in-law who lives down the road, Chet. And between Chet, Josh, and Dad and I, we managed to get the window in. And it was a tight fit. It really was. But it fits really nicely, totally secure, and looks great. So that was really awesome. And, it proved that we could do something that I didn't think we could do ourselves. So that was a good thing too. So now it's just a matter of putting everything back and finishing the painting job. The ceilings are done. Finally, I had to use an entire extra gallon of paint to fix all of the problems. And then also fix the kitchen, which I had not wanted to paint, but I think the guy had made a mistake and accidentally got some ceiling paint on the wall and then used that as an excuse to go on ahead and paint the kitchen, which I don't know. It's just kind of snowballed and kind of got a little crazy on us. Today I'm going to be doing trim work, and we ran into another problem with the paneling. The living room has that kind of cheap, old, fake wood paneling. And yes, I would love to replace it, but that would have extended this project and made it even bigger. So we were like, all right, let's just put back the same stuff that's on the wall and go with that. And then paint it so it looks consistent with everything else. Unfortunately, the new stuff is thinner than the old stuff because this house was built in 1973. So it's definitely different stuff that's being sold now in comparison to then. And then it's not taking the paint. It's basically I primed over the paneling, and then Dad scraped his thumb across it, and the paint just peeled right back off again. So we're going to have to troubleshoot and figure out how to fix that today. I think we're probably going to end up having to sand it very lightly to kind of scratch the surface, and then use a high bonding type of primer. I think the combination of those two things is going to work. I hope it works. I'm really wanting to get this finished up and done, just knock it out. I'm ready to go back to real life, to regular life. It's one of those things where, I think taking a week off of doing what you normally do and doing something kind of tough and physical, it's a good thing, because for me at least, it's reminded me just how much I love quilting and just how much I love my normal job. I don't want to be a contractor. I don't want to be a construction worker, although I can do this work. I wouldn't want to do this professionally, because it is really, really tough. I'm looking forward to getting back on my machines and getting back to quilting. And today I'm going to only work for half the day on painting, because we've got two big things. James is going to level up again in karate. He's got a test today, and that's going to be exciting. And then right after that is the wearable art fashion show at the Arts Council. So I have two masks that I entered for that. And one is my big black feather mask that I made for a masquerade ball. And then the other is this massive flower mask. It has these 3 huge honkin' flowers, and then lots of ferns and little flowers all around. I love how it came out. It is an adventure to put it on your head, and it's definitely heavy, but I can't wait to take pictures of it on a model. It's really hard for me to actually capture a good picture of it myself when I'm wearing it, because it's that big. You really have to kind of step back from it and take a picture. So that's really been exciting. And I'm looking forward to that this evening. So I think today I'm going to just paint the trim and then clean up and actually get to quilting. I'm missing it. I'm missing it so badly. I'm like, I have got to touch a machine today, or I'm going to just be sad. So that's what's been going on. Thankfully, I worked ahead, and I have block number 4 all ready to go. It's going to be launching tomorrow, so you can come and see what that new block looks like. It is an even month. It's number 4, so it's going to be a Dresden plate. And this month it's called a Daisy Dresden. So you'll have to come and see it. Just come to leahday.com/block party, and you can check it out. And I love this new block. It has more feathers, and it's a curved petal Dresden. So we'll learn more about applique and piecing those curved petal shapes together. So that's pretty much it for the updates around the house. If you would like to support the show, come and check out my website at leahday.com and support us just by checking things out and maybe picking up a quilting tool or supply. Of course, you can join in the machine quilting block party, and that's just $4.99 per block pattern, and it comes with not just the piecing instructions, it also comes with a full-size printable quilt guide, so that you can print out the quilt guide and mark your quilt block, and then just be able to quilt on the marked lines. It really makes quilting faster and easier and a great learning experience. So come check that out at leahday.com/block party. And now here's the show. Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and I'm here with Leah Kabaker, a hobby quilter and blogger at noidlehandshere.com. Welcome to the show, Leah.
See? Leah!
This is so funny. We have the same spelling of our name, but you pronounce it differently, so I'm sorry. Welcome to the show, Leah.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's get started with how you got into quilting. What made you want to make your first quilt?
Well, it's a really interesting story because I moved with my family to Israel when I was 8 years old. There is no quilting tradition there. There were no quilters in my family. There was none of that. But I've always been involved in fiber arts. I learned how to knit and crochet and embroider from a very, very young age. So any new kind of fiber art really interested me. I was at a friend's house, and she had a Quilter's Newsletter magazine. She wasn't a quilter. I'm not sure what it was, but she had the magazine, and this was in the late 70s, and I just devoured it cover to cover. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was just getting married at the time, so I said to my in-laws, you've got to subscribe and get me this magazine. So I started getting the magazine, and we would come back and visit the States, once a year or so. So the first thing I did is I actually visited my aunt in Washington, D.C., and we went to the original G Street fabric store when it was on G Street. And I bought fabrics, and I chose a pattern, and I went back home, and it was all done by hand-pieced. What I discovered when I finished the top, which happens a lot with many, many quilt patterns, the way I laid out my fabric, I had swastikas. The whole quilt was swastikas. And there was no more fabric, there was no more. And so what I was able to do was, instead of plain sashing between the blocks, I put in some kind of diamond, and I was able to break it up. And that made me fall in love with quilting all the more, solve a problem.
Absolutely.
The funny thing is, I knew nothing about what a real quilt is supposed to look like. And in Israel, they have comforters. So I thought, well, it's supposed to be big and poofy. So I bought like 2 layers of upholstery batting and hand quilted it. So it was big and heavy, and unfortunately, in one of my moves, it didn't come along.
Oh no, so you've lost it.
I've lost it, and I was even looking to see if I had photographs, and I don't. So for a couple of years there, I would buy fabric when I visit the States. And then I actually started a group in Israel of quilters. I put out the word. Some of us were Americans. 1 or 2 were Israelis who had just seen this and really fell in love with it. We'd bring fabrics back. Now, there is cotton fabric. It's not like there isn't cotton fabric. This was in the 80s when there was that very definite calico kind of fabric. But we'd quilt together. And one of those women now lives in the LA area. She doesn't quilt anymore, but we're really good friends. So on my visits here to the States, my mother-in-law introduced me to a friend who was a quilter, so I was able to go to the famous San Fernando Valley Quilt Association Guild, which had Judy Matheson and some other really top-notch people. And then we moved here in 1990. At the time that we moved here, I was like, who makes the fabrics? That was part of the question I had. And turns out that fabrics were being manufactured here in LA. So I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, got myself a little degree in textile design, and went and worked in the industry, at which point I didn't quilt much.
Because you were working with fabric all day, right?
That was part of it, yeah. Very interesting thing, though, the quilting fabric part of the fabric world is tiny. It's really small. One of the first companies I worked for did have quilting fabric, and I'm completely blanking on the name, but there was an illustrator who made very cute little designs, and she had her designs put on fabric, and it happened to be the company I was working for. She was the only one at the time that I knew who had her name on the selvage. But it was divided. You had over-the-counter fabrics, which are for the home home sewers. And then the big part of the market was wholesale. And that's really where that was all for the retail market. And that's where the exciting designs were. And so I ended up working, the wholesale market, and really had very little to do with the quilting fabrics.
I see.
So.
Yeah, and so, just working in fabric, can you kind of describe what that was like, how you would develop something new?
Well, that's the interesting thing. This is what I find so fascinating is, at that time, our companies, they were called converters because they converted the raw good to printed goods. It was still happening here in LA. I think now there's probably no more printing going on here. It's probably all overseas. But what they would do is there were these large studios. And I actually had friends that ended up working for some of these studios where artists would just paint. And then the reps would come by every so often with these massive portfolios, and the design director and actually the head of sales as well, they'd sit there and go through these portfolios and say, we want this, we want that. They choose the prints they'd want. They bring it to us in the studio, and it would be this gorgeous painted something, and they're like, okay, knock it down to 7 screens. 10 screens was fabulous. Because every color is a screen. And the less screens, the less expensive the fabric. So we had to get creative in trying to, keep something that looks spectacular, which didn't look that spectacular anymore. And then they would say, okay, make 1 or 2 things that'll go with this. Because even in the garment industry, they like lines that'll have some cohesion. Every once in a while, they would say, if there was some time, you know what, we're seeing the daisies are really big. Just start drawing your own, because we're paying you a salary. It saves us the $250 we have to pay for the croquis, which is what the artwork was called. And the other big thing that we did there all the time was put these designs into repeat. When you're printing, it's a roll, and it is 25¼ inches, which works out to something perfect in centimeters. I don't know if it's 40 or something, and we had to sit there, and we would do it on paper. We would do it by hand. I had a really big light table, and you'd have to figure out how to get it so that the pattern will flow as it prints. And I've just developed an eye that I can stand there and stare at somebody's dress, and I'm like, okay, that's where the repeat is. That's where the... and then colorways. We had to change the colorways. We did it all by hand with gouache paints. This was the mid-90s. CAD design was coming in at the time. At the time, CAD design was not very good. We all were experts with our paintbrush that you could get to that beautiful fine point. And when it went to the screen engravers, they did the same thing. They were working by hand. Well, as soon as the computers came in, it was all very blunt and not very good looking. I'm sure it's completely different now, but that was the early stages. And that was, that was about it.
That's fascinating.
I had one funny experience. They asked me to design, it was a little daisies on, like a harlequin plaid. So, the one that goes diagonal. And I designed it, and what they would do is they would do the strike-offs. And it would be maybe 10 yards or something, and the salesman would go out, and if there was an interest, then they put it into production. If not, that's it, gone. Well, after I left that company and started freelancing, 2 things happened. Number one, I went to interview for someone, and the print was sitting there. And I looked at the guy and I said, I designed that. He said, oh? I said, yeah, I don't know how you got that. I'm assuming that the screen engravers sold it to you. But something illegal has happened here. But it's the garment industry. It's none of my... And then a month or two later, a little girl in my son's class was wearing a shirt out of that print.
Oh my gosh. So you got paid salary to do that. You never made the royalties on that fabric.
No, you never do. Not when you work in-house.
Oh, okay.
You don't. And even if you work for a studio, because when I freelanced, I had a rep and I would just paint a gazillion paintings. And then they'd take them out in their portfolios, and a few would sell here and there. You got the money you got. That was it.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no royalty. But to me, it was like somebody cheated the company I used to work for.
I see.
But that's the way the garment industry works.
I see. So things have changed a lot, since you were working in it. Now, like right now, I design occasionally for Spoonflower, and I just put something together digitally on my computer, and then I upload it, and I can have some printed and like shipped in a day or two. And you were talking about that a little bit via email, just how there's just so many more fabric designers, and especially for quilting. How do you feel about that, and how do you feel like that's changed?
Well, I got back into quilting about 8 years ago, just as the modern quilt movement was coming along, and it was a fabulous shot in the arm because it was this whole new way of approaching quilting. Although when I look at my old quilts, I was always into scrappy whenever possible, and I was interested in the sort of the art quilts back in the 80s. So I never was 100% traditional. But I remember one of the first meetings I went to, somebody was talking about Spoonflower, and she was showing examples. And I'm like, but that's all wrong. It's one-directional fabric. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? Because when you're designing wholesale fabric, the next stage when it goes to the clothing manufacturer is somebody is going to figure out how to utilize that fabric and cut it with as little waste as possible. So if it's two-directional, a stripe, that's one thing. But in general, they want it all over so that you don't have a problem of elements being upside down or some. There'll always be some upside down, some straight up. And I've noticed that in the quilting fabrics now, so many are one-directional. It's less of a problem for the quilting world because unless your quilt is hanging on a wall, you see it from different angles. It still bugs me though. I did a mariner's compass, and I had little anchors, and I wanted them all facing out. And it was a one-directional fabric, and it's, but with the large numbers of designers, I have a feeling that a lot of these companies are no longer going to the studios. They're not going to those studios that used to bring in prints. They now have this massive stable of people and constantly new people approaching them. And so they can, whatever deals they make with the designers, and I know each company is different, but they've just saved themselves having to buy. And then now their people in-house are still putting it into repeat, doing the different colorways, doing, I wouldn't be surprised if in some cases they're doing some of the fillers as well. But I'm finding right now there's a massive saturation, and I just went back and made a quilt for my son with Elizabeth Hartman's animals and Civil War fabrics. It was like I need a break from all the, it feels like every week or two somebody's pulling out a new fabric line. So
Yeah, it's really fast. It really does seem like it's really fast. And I pretty much work with solids and solid reading batiks. And I mean, like, solid reading batiks, you know, I work with Island Batik, and they pretty much have their set, and that's it. And they don't go out of stock, which is what I like the most. Like, I can depend on that always being there, and I can always order it. And I look at fabric as like paint. So to me, a print is distracting, you know, but it's really interesting to hear you talk about it. And I'm like, I'm even looking at your shirt, and you're kind of wearing a one-directional print shirt. It's got these... Yeah, it's really cute. I'm just going to describe it real quick so everybody knows what I'm looking at. It's got all of these pictures. They look like vintage fashion models, like Vogue, maybe from a vintage pattern, and they're kind of printed all over with like little buttons and some writing and stuff. It's really cute.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a Japanese fabric. I got it at a quilt show, and I knew I was going to make a shirt out of it because in a quilt, I've seen people cut this fabric up, but I had to buy more fabric so that I wouldn't have one side going up and one side going down. And I have seen, you know, I'll see maybe in a fashion magazine somebody with a one-directional print, and what that says to me is it's a very expensive piece of clothing.
Yeah, absolutely, because you have to buy that much more yardage in order to do the other half of it.
Right. So for the companies that are willing to manufacture, you know, they're it's interesting. I have a number of friends, one or two friends who are now fabric designers. Now, one of them was she was a graphic designer and a surface designer already. And she was telling our guild, she said, you know what? I think she's working with Moda. She said, 6 weeks, that's it. They liked her what she showed them. She made a whole line. They put it in different colorways. They sent their salesman out. They said it's in production for 6 weeks and we're done. No more. So it'll probably be in the stores for longer than that. But the turnover now is such that, I mean, I think of, is it, what is it, pearl bracelet? It's Elizabeth somebody, not Hartman.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Anyway, not off the top of my head.
Quilters will know pearl bracelet. That is such a winner of a pattern that they don't, it stays in production all the time. But most of what gets out there has a very short shelf life. I'd say in the modern quilt world, I think that the traditional print patterns, there are those that are just, they're always there. Or they're making similar ones. So you get the mega stars, and kudos to Cotton and Steel. When those women approached RJR and said, we want to do this, I think the first thing RJR said is, fabulous, we'd love to. It's all on you. You have to market. You have to push it. You have to do everything. And they have, and they've done a phenomenal job. But it makes it a little harder then for the little person who managed to approach Wyndham or Moda or something. Because the superstars, people want the fabric from the superstars.
Yeah, and then it becomes, is it really the fabric or is it that personality attached to it? You know, is it really that everyone loves the fabric, or that, hey, I want to go collect that because then I can sell it for a whole lot more on Instagram later? I mean, like, I see all kinds of stuff. I see Tula Pink fabric being sold on Instagram and eBay and stuff and jacking up the prices. I mean, it's kind of like, it's crazy fabric fever. That's a side of the quilting world that I kind of just don't even really delve into because I don't like prints. I can't see my quilting through a print. So that's kind of a side of it that I really haven't tapped into, but I know exactly what you're saying. And as far as what I understand, they have a very limited time to make the quilts with their fabric. So it comes in and they have to like make up their projects in like 6 weeks and then get them out for the catalogs and stuff. So that seems a little unsustainable to me.
Well, I think it is unsustainable. I mean, you know what it's like running your own business. there's so many facets to it, and you have to make your choices about what you are and aren't going to do. Nobody can make money just being a fabric designer. I mean, when I worked in the industry, yes, it was more than minimum wage, and it was okay. It was a job, which was fine because I went home and that was that. But if you have a line of fabric, you immediately have to come out with patterns to go along with the fabric so that people will see. And they're all very similar because they have to be very simple, plain. I don't know. I mean, for me, I love mixing fabrics. So when I'm looking at fabrics, it's like, well, what's the color story I'm looking at? Does this fabric either complement that one, or is it so jarring next to that one? And that was one of the great things, painting sitting there and painting. I developed an eye for color. I really developed an eye for putting things together so that they work, even though you wouldn't think they work. I mean, I totally understand when, I guess it was in the last 10 years. I mean, they only started calling themselves the modern quilters about 8 years ago. But, women said, ooh, let me try this. And they went for a line of fabric because it all works together. I made one quilt out of a line of fabric because I gave it away. The friend that I gave it to loves it, but to me, it's lacking something because it doesn't have.
You didn't pull it together. You didn't pick it.
Right, but it doesn't have either the ugly fabric or that color that really shouldn't be there that just makes it pop.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's great, and I from what I've seen, the people who are successful, that you keep on seeing a line coming again and again, they either had something of a background or they are fabulous at marketing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're figuring out a way of making a living with it. Otherwise, I hope they wouldn't continue to do it over and over again, right?
Right, but then, I mean, and look, let's be honest, for many of them, it's a second income.
Yeah.
Which means that and to me, this is fabulous for those women that they've got children, they want to be home. It gives them the second income without having to leave the kids and leave the home all day. And it can be very gratifying, but it's work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest, I've dabbled with it a little bit, and I really didn't know what I was doing, and I kind of pulled back and was like, you know what? I love to make patterns, and I love to design quilting designs, but I'm not sure that fabric design is really my forte or something I really want to be spending a lot of my time on right now. And so I had to be honest about that, and also just say, like, look, I can be a professional quilter without being a fabric designer too.
Right.
It seems like that has all kind of gotten a little convoluted. Like, everyone that writes a book has to also have a fabric line, and then everyone that has a fabric line also has to write patterns, and it's just, that seems a little excessive to me. And that was something that we wanted to talk about today too, and that was just being a hobby quilter and kind of your perspective, because you have a blog and you share beautiful photos, but you have no real desire to go pro with this, right?
Absolutely not. I went pro. I did the pro when I did the fabric design. And then I had 3 kids, and after a while, it was like, I was fortunate that I didn't have to work full-time anymore, and so I stopped. So I have no desire in going pro. Oh, first of all, I do have to say, when I initially, I hand quilted and hand pieced, and then very quickly I learned that you could piece by machine, but I still hand quilted. And I think the last quilt I made before my break was like 95 or 96, and then I was machine quilting. So in that break, until I came back to it about 8 years ago, it was like, okay, let's see about this machine quilting. I took your Craftsy class, which was wonderful. And here's the interesting thing. my style of hand quilting is not like yours at all. But I learned so much from doing the different blocks and doing the different, that it was fabulous. I'm very fortunate. I don't have to work now. I have been a professional volunteer for quite a while. I've been a docent at LA County Museum of Art. I'm now a docent with our LA Conservancy, where I give tours of old buildings in downtown. I'm very fortunate that I can, I have these things that really interest me, and I'm multi-craftual. I quilt, I sew, I knit, I crochet. I don't work with fire. I beaded for a while. I made different beading things, but I'd always buy somebody else's beads because I never wanted to work with fire. I tried it once or twice and said, no.
Lampert glass bead making. I did that in high school. It is some seriously crazy stuff.
Yeah, and they're fabulous. But anyway, so for me, it's like I tried, I think early on, before Etsy, I wonder what would have happened with Etsy. I tried to sell jewelry, different beaded jewelry, and I even went to a couple of shows, and I realized I'm not willing to give up my weekends, and you have to produce so much because you never sell everything, and the more you have, the more people will come and buy. So it's really, really hard to make a living or even a secondary income from things you make. But I love making things. I love making things. And so for me, it's like, I don't want to knock the other podcasters that I listen to, but 90% of the people are, well, you started quilting 4 years ago and now you have a fabric line. And it's like, I understand the new designers want exposure and the podcaster would love to, but you need people like me who never want to make a dime out of this, because I'm going to be the one who's buying the stuff.
That is totally true. I mean, like, I write patterns and I do a quilt along for hobby quilters. I want beginners. I want people that are just getting into it, and you're totally right. That, for me, like doing the podcast, sometimes it's easier for me to talk about business because I'm like, okay, we can chat about social media or something like that. And it's harder almost to like, okay, like, kind of, what are we going to talk about? We love quilting, it's kind of, that's challenging, but I love hearing your perspective.
Yeah. And for me, as I say, I live in Los Angeles. I belong to 2 modern quilt guilds. I mean, there's a lot going on here. There's so much on the internet. It's been fascinating to see how the modern quilters have changed, what they were doing just 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And with my background, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. Now, yes, there was a big break, but still. So I learned how to, as I said, I learned how to make a quilt by hand. I learned how to quilt, I know now big stitch quilting is a big thing, which is nice and fun, but I remember how proud I was when I got my little stitches down to really tiny little stitches on the hoop. I mean, it's just, there's something to be said for knowing the history and being able to do the older style of quilting as well as fabric design. I mean, some people I know, they'll paint or they'll draw first and then they'll put it on the computer and add the colors. There's a gal that I follow on Instagram and I love her stuff, Janine Morrison. And lately she's got the top of the line iPad and she will do a quick video of how she puts together a design, which is fabulous. And I love watching it. Most people aren't like her. So for me, it's like, when you're concentrating, not you, but when it's all about how do you make money in this industry that we're in, it's not an industry for most of us. Many of us quilted long before there were the masses amounts of fabric and rulers and everything. Now, I love me a good ruler. I'm constantly, somebody says this does a great. I have the AccuQuilt because I was making a hexagon quilt. I love the tools and the rulers and everything. But for most of us out there, it's not an industry, it's a hobby.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's gotten just too much? Like too many gadgets, too many gizmos, too much expectation that you need that extra thing to make that?
Yeah, I do. And I've been sucked into buying things that within, I'm like, why did I do that? I don't need that. Just the other day, though, I took a big bag of fabric and gave it to another quilter. So then I can get some new stuff. But I enjoy, for instance, the whole thing with Quilt Market. It's very interesting to me to follow a handful of people who are in the business as they go to Quilt Market. But from talking to people who've gone, it's a trade show. It's not, it's like I hear people say, well, why can't we come? Well, you have Quilt Festival. We have Quilt Festival right afterwards. I do find sometimes, and the other thing I find is that I still think that the majority of quilters are very traditional, and unfortunately for the industry, I think this is one of the reasons why there's all the push. It is an aging group, and it goes through its revivals. I don't think quilting is going to die. Knitting never died. Embroidery, it's going through its revival right now, but I would say most quilters are older women that use the traditional fabrics and want the traditional patterns. But for me, it's like I have to create. I called my blog I wanted No Idle Hands, but that was taken, so I added the here and there because my hands are never idle. I'm always doing something with my hands. And there's nothing more satisfying to me than a handmade home. I love cooking. I love cooking and quilts and sweaters and socks and all over the place. It's a fabulous gift to give to somebody I care about, but I'm very selective. Is the person quilt worthy or even bag worthy?
So what makes
I think for many of us, we want to be creative, but you're right, at some point I'm beginning to feel like, stop. I need things to slow down.
Yeah. What now? Just to follow up, what makes a person particularly quilt worthy or bag worthy? I have to know.
Well, it's got to be somebody I really care about.
Yes.
It has to be. Although I will say, because I also knit, I rarely give away knitted objects because you're making the fabric stitch by stitch.
Mm-hmm.
All my family members have received socks. One or two received sweaters, but that, it's like I'm not going to knit a sweater for somebody.
No, never.
I don't like knitting even baby blankets. I've done it for my grandkids, but nobody else. But I have made baby quilts, and then when I hear of somebody who's having a baby and I like them, they may not be near and dear to me, I'm happy to give them the quilt. But, so it depends how much work went into it, but it has to be somebody, And I think that was part of selling, is that when you're selling, I did sell things through the years. It's not like I sold nothing. And then it's like, okay, I had to cut back on my materials and on the quality so that I could make a profit.
Yep.
And if somebody's quilt worthy, then it doesn't matter how much the fabric cost or how much time. It's a gift of love.
Yeah, and that's my advice. You know, a lot of times people will ask me, like, how much should I charge for this? If someone wants me to make something, my advice is always either do it for nothing, do it as a gift, as a labor of love. You love that person, you cherish them, they are, you know, part of your life, and you are willing to do that completely for free, or don't do it at all. Because otherwise it can take a really nice relationship and make it very icky very quickly.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm very careful about that. And, you know, my past, I was a seamstress for about 1.5 years, and nearly killed myself just trying to sew professionally and make enough garments. And, like, I was working for kind of a warehouse situation, and it was awful. And I will never make something to sell again. I will never, like, make a product like a bag or something and try and sell that, because I would much rather make the pattern so that you can make the bag. You know, I'd much rather do it that way. I think that works better.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because a friend recently, the big thing in the modern quilt world today is improv. And I realized that I really don't like improv. I love working within the confines of a pattern. And I might do some breakout or something, but I like limitations. To me, that is where my creativity comes in. And it was a project I did in a class with Luke Haynes, and it was a great class, and I learned a lot, and I finished it, and I didn't like it, and my friend said, I'll buy it from you. And I didn't sell it to her for much, but, you know, it was like, okay, great, because otherwise it's sitting somewhere, but otherwise, no, I really don't. And I agree. I think long arm quilters, there's a formula of how much they charge. And I was just fortunate because a friend of mine has a fabulous Bernina long arm, and she's not charging me a whole lot to quilt on it. So I'm able to learn how this thing works and what I like and what I don't like. But she was telling me, you know, she said, well, I quilt very heavily. And she said she couldn't do that for a customer. Even if, you know, the customer said, I want you to not do a pentagram. But so I think long arm quilters, pattern designers, you can figure out how much to charge for a pattern. I think what you're doing is fabulous because you're constantly coming out with new quilting designs, which give people ideas of, right? Mm-hmm. How to do that.
Exactly. And it's more of use this to finish the quilt you've already made, you know? Because we all have quilt tops. We got to quilt them with something, you know?
Right.
And so a little bit, you wanted to get into a little bit about craft versus art. And it sounds like, you know, on the one hand, you are very much a craftswoman. You know how it should be done. And you put quilts together by hand, so you know the rules. And it sounds like you got those stitches down tiny and you made the effort to do that. But, you know, and we're kind of getting, you know, we've gotten a little bit away from that in the craft. So... yeah. What is the craft? What is the art? All that kind of stuff. If you want to go on, you know, into that, to me, it's all the same thing. You know, craft, art, all of it, same thing. I don't differentiate and I don't put a label on it. I just quilt. What about you?
Well, I guess because I was a docent in an art museum for so long, and LA County Museum is an encyclopedic museum, so we had everything from 5,000-year-old pots from Persia to something that somebody made yesterday. So I was sort of immersed in the art world, and my feeling is when you call everything art, nothing is art. And this is my big problem with a lot of modern and contemporary. It doesn't mean anything. When I would introduce the students, I would say two things we're going to see. We're going to see art, which was made to decorate something. It could have been a church, it could have been a home. We will see artifacts, and the reason they're in the museum is because they are so old and unique and special. But they weren't made to be decorative. Now, humans have decorated everything. As soon as they learned how to make pots, they decorated them. But art was for a higher purpose even then. The easiest thing to say is it was used in religion, any religion. It was part of religion to edify whatever was going on in the religion. That's the simplest way. And then, of course, it moved from there and became more decorative and more, it didn't have to be about religion or history. But modern art has lost its soul. It really has no soul. It has no purpose. And it's like, and I see it so clearly when I go into museums. And so to me, it's like you've demeaned art. On the other hand, craft has always had a purpose. If it was to keep people warm with quilts, if it was a basket to use to collect grains, it always had a purpose. And at LACMA, they will have craft shows. The number of people that show up for those craft shows outnumbers any of the modern art exhibits by a good 5 or 6. Because people relate to something that has a soul. And my feeling always is, if you're making something with your hands, it's got a soul.
Yeah.
So that's part of it for me. That to me, art is not, today the word art has been so degraded that it doesn't mean anything. And I'm so proud of my craft that I would rather say to people, no, this is craft, and this is something that people have done forever, and women have done forever, men have done forever. It hasn't been, one or the other. But that I'd rather elevate craft.
I completely understand. I think I heard this from the book. I think it was Art and Fear. And it was postmodern art is also a post-observation art, which means, it is art, but we've kind of lost the people that actually want to see it. So it's kind of gone together.
It's true. And so to me, I see, in the quilt world, people are making amazing things. And some of them are, I really enjoyed, Mary Fons had a webinar on the Modern Quilt website about a year or two ago about the 4 stages of quilting. And she basically, traditional, contemporary, art, and modern. And I was like, I'm contemporary. That's where I fit because I'm doing all kinds of different things. But as quilters, we do want to make something. You can buy a blanket. You can go buy a blanket. You can buy a comforter. Back in the early years of America, the very wealthy people made quilts. Everybody else, the itinerant weaver, who happened to be a man, went from town to town, and he wove linsey-woolsey blankets, which are fantastically gorgeous. But that's what people did until fabric became more you had more of it, and then more and more people started quilting. And I think a quilt is an amazing thing. It keeps you warm in a way a blanket doesn't. But it's the craft of it that, and so for me, a glass blower or a ceramicist or whatever, some of them would like to be called artists. To me, it's like, I would like to elevate craft because what they are doing is amazing.
Absolutely. So, I completely agree. So I have one last question for you, and this is something I ask everybody. What are you most looking forward to in the next 5 years? You have had this amazing career in textiles, and now you are a certified hobbyist. So in the next 5 years, what are you looking forward to, whether it's personal or quilting or crafting, anything?
Well, let me see. Thank God the family's all doing well, so that should continue. I just want to be able to continue to grow in my craft. I'm hoping I'll still be quilting in 5 years, because quilting is really incredible. But if I take a break from that and end up doing some other craft, so be it. I know I'll be crafting. I just have to be making things with my hands. And, I mean, my hope is, not that my obituary should come anytime soon, but, if my obituary is that I raised a fabulous family and I made incredible things that I shared with people around me, that would be amazing, because I just find that creating is so important. And even if it's a pot holder or whatever. And so, but certainly I think because the quilting world has so much happening, I'll probably still be. I need to find more people to give quilts to.
You got to make more friends.
That's the other thing. Our guild, both of the guilds have charity quilts. It's very easy for me to make a baby-sized charity quilt. That's an easy thing. It doesn't take me very long. And yes, I'm putting my heart into it. But because the time is not that great, that's a wonderful way of giving, that I know I can give charity with quilting that's not, top of the line of what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I love hearing your perspectives on everything. It was fascinating.
Well, I love your podcast. I heard you're going to every 2 weeks.
Yeah, we had to slow it down. I just couldn't figure out how to kind of fit it in, but so far that's working much better. So this has been delightful. Let everybody know where they can come and find you online.
So my blog is called noidlehandshere.com. I'm also on Instagram as Leah Kab, so that's LEAHKAB. And I pretty much every day I throw something up on Instagram. As I say, I now give tours in LA, so I love just sharing pictures of my surroundings. I don't care where you live somewhere interesting. Just start looking around at your surroundings and you'll find it's an interesting place. So those are the two places that I'm really sharing.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. This has been such a delight. So definitely check out Leah's website and be following her on Instagram. That's it for this episode. If you'd like to find more podcast episodes to listen to, plus the show notes, check it out at leahday.com/podcast. Until next time, let's go quilt.